Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. I want to get into reviewing the Tamron 150-500mm f5 to 6.7. This lens was sent over to us by Tamron because they wanted us to test it out, see what we thought about it, share our experiences with you guys. That being said, Tamron never tells us what to say, what to touch on. They just give us a lens and say, take it out, use it, and let us know what you think. And that's basically what we're going to be doing today. The very first thing I want to get into is the physical portion of the lens. So as you guys can see, it's not the smallest lens, but it's also not, you know, enormous for what it is. So if you compare this, let's say, to a 70 to 180, this is the 150 to 500. This is the 70 to 180. So let's see comparison right there. So you can see, obviously the 150 to 500 is gonna be a lot bigger, but it's not, you know, a huge lens for what it is. Now, one of the reasons for that is that it is a variable lens and it's not, you know, a 2.8, it's not an f4 lens, it's a 5 to 6.7 lens. So even though you're sacrificing a little bit of that f-stop, you are getting a little bit of lightness to the lens because of that. So that's first things first. Second thing is zoom. So it's an external zooming lens. So obviously it's not gonna be inside that everything's moving. You're gonna see it get larger as you zoom in and obviously a little smaller as you zoom out to 150. Another thing that I wanna touch on is when you're at 150, you can lock it by just going right here, locking it, and now it's not gonna zoom in or out. Another option that Tamron does give you, which I do like, is that if you wanted to, let's say, zoom into 300 and you don't want it to creep or anything like that, if you're leaning on something or if you're walking and you don't want it to zoom in or zoom out, so you're ready at that focal length, you can pull that forward as you guys just saw. So right there, it's very slight, but you see a little bit of a gray white line. And what that does is now you're not gonna zoom in or zoom out. It's not gonna creep and zoom in or zoom out as you're walking around. So it's a nice little extra feature. Some YouTubers were complaining that sometimes you may hit it accidentally. I didn't really have much of an issue with that. I feel like I was pretty conscious as to like if I'm really wanting to do that or not. Most of the times I never really use that feature, but it's there in case you want it, need it. Again, I'm not a wildlife photographer, so I'm sure you guys will let me know below exactly when you would be using that sort of feature. But for me, I think it's just nice that there is that, so it's not zooming out as you're carrying. Because it is a heavy lens, it probably will zoom and stretch out as you're walking around with it. Another thing is understanding the features as far as the focusing distance. So if you're focusing and you know you're gonna be shooting something that's fairly close, you probably wanna have it at full, so that way it can go through the entire range of the zoom. If you know that you're gonna be shooting something that's a little bit further away, 3 meters is the one in the middle. If something is 3 meters, or what's that, 9 feet in America? If that's something further, you wanna have it on that, so it's not gonna hunt all the way back and all the way to infinity. And even further than that, if something is gonna be 15 meters, which is what, 45 feet or so, away or further, you wanna put it on that so your autofocus is gonna be a lot quicker. It's not gonna try to focus something that's 10 feet away when that's not what you're aiming towards. So if you're at a bird sanctuary or you're in a reserve, like you're seeing some of the photos right now, some of the footage when I went out there, I'm not gonna have it on the full range because it's unnecessary. Everything's so far away, there's no reason for the lens to hunt and search all the way really close and all the way really far. Just search a little bit further away, autofocus is gonna be much quicker. Next thing, underneath that, you're gonna have manual and autofocus. I don't know why I would wanna shoot with manual focus, but it's there. If you guys know why you would wanna shoot in manual focus, let me know. But as far as I'm concerned, I feel like autofocus is so good on this that I wouldn't want to take it off of that. Underneath that is vibration compensation. So you can have it on, you can have it off. On a lens like this, you absolutely want to have it on unless you have it on a monopod or a tripod. Because obviously if you're at 150 or, you know, if you're really zoomed in at 500, there's going to be a lot of extra shake, especially if you had a little caffeine that day. So make sure that you keep that on unless, again, if you're on a tripod or monopod. Next thing is vibration compensation modes. So there's 3 different modes. There's normal, there's panning, which is the one in the middle. So if you're following a subject, you want to have it on that. And then the last one is if they're moving, but it's not necessarily panning, you're not doing that motion, but it is a lot of motion, or if you are moving a lot, you want to have it on that. But for me, I left it on VC, the first one, pretty much the entire time that I shot. I didn't really mess too much with the other ones, so I can't speak on that really extensively, but it seemed like that nailed it for most of the situations that I was shooting, as you guys are seeing right now. As far as sharpness goes, one thing that I was very adamant about is I did shoot in a slightly higher burst mode, not in like really fast. I put it in slow burst, but I did a little bit of burst mode because some of the things that I was shooting were moving really quickly. Some of the things that I was shooting were really far away. So if I even had a little bit of shakiness, I feel like as long as I shoot a few frames, I'm gonna catch the one that's in focus. You only need one, guys. So I feel like I did that as a safety. I did overshoot a little bit because of that, but it's still, I feel like, was a better option than shooting in single mode and then risking having out of focus images. The sharpness on it was really good. I do think having the right settings and what you're doing, having the right shutter speed is gonna help tremendously. So if you're shooting something at 500 millimeters, if you're using vibration compensation, you can probably get away with something under 1/500th of a second, even 2/50th of a second. I know I kind of pushed it on a few, but I would rather push my ISO a little bit instead of risking having an autofocus image or a shaky image. One thing that I always say is I would rather have an image that has a little bit of grain than an image that's clean but is out of focus or it's blurry or whatever the case may be. So don't worry about pushing your ISO. As long as you have a fairly modern camera, I would say 1600 and 3200 ISO are gonna be completely fine. This is the original A9 and I shoot this thing at 1600, 6400 even without worrying because I know that it's gonna be relatively clean. Another thing that they included on this lens from a physical standpoint is the Arca-Swiss Mount. So I know a lot of nature photographers, they're gonna have monopods with that type of plate. So it just makes it easy that it's already attached to the lens. So that's great if you have a monopod and that way you don't need to add anything else. However, they do add the thread. So if you need to add a Manfrotto plate, for example, because that's what I use. If you need to add that, you can always attach it to that, and now you have the Manfrotto plate attached to it, the quick release or anything like that. So that's really nice. Another thing is that you can unscrew it, as you're seeing right here, and then shift it over. So if you're shooting vertically, you can shift it over so you can, well, actually, let's not chicken wing it. So we're gonna go around the other way and line it up. So you see right here, there's these two little dots that are gonna line up. I don't know if you guys can see them clearly, but right there, that's what you're gonna line up. It doesn't click, which is something that I saw another reviewer mention, and I think it probably would have been better if there was a little clicking so you know you're reaching the right area. But at the end of the day, you can look for it. And for me, I mean, it doesn't have to be exactly perfect. Like I can still hold it and then, get in there or get like this. But as long as it gives me something that I can balance it with instead of having to hold it like this, that's really nice. So I do like that little feature that you can rotate the ring. And you can also remove the ring entirely. So if you wanted to remove it, you can. I don't want to, so I'm just gonna leave that thing back on. Let me screw it in. There we go. And then the last thing, I think the last thing as far as the physical aspect of it is, or actually there's two more things I'm gonna touch on. One is the hood. The hood is pretty robust plastic. We've taken it out and I'm not gonna say we abused it, but we definitely used it in various situations that tested the durability of this lens hood, and it did really good. Another thing that they did do on this lens hood is they added rubber on the tip. So if you look right there, you see that different color. There is a little bit of rubber, which is nice because if you tap it, it's not gonna bend, it's gonna bounce back a little bit, which I don't know if I've seen that on another lens hood. I like that, it's a nice little feature. As far as the filter thread, it is 82 millimeters, so it is a pretty massive boy in the front. So if you're looking for filters, 82 millimeter is what you're gonna wanna order. And another thing that is a little bit reassuring if you're shooting nature or wildlife. English is my second language, so sometimes words are a little difficult. I'm gonna use that as an excuse. But if you're shooting wildlife, it's weather sealed. So we did get caught in some rain in Hawaii while I was shooting with this. Now, just because something says that it's weather sealed doesn't mean that you should be cocky about it and abusive about it. So even though it was weather sealed, I still don't trust the A9 all that much because of this. We had a photographer who had his camera like this and a bit of water fell into here and that was the end of that camera. So not gonna take a chance with that. So even though it's weather sealed, just, still obviously try not to get it drenched if you can avoid it. But it should give you a little bit of, I guess, a little bit of safety, a little bit of of confidence that if it's raining or if it's drizzling, it should be okay. These cameras I'm not the most confident with, so these I would protect a little bit more than the lens itself. So there's that. I just wanted to mention that, you know, in case you do shoot in a climate that you do get more rain. Here in Southern California, we get rain just a few times out of the year, so not something that really concerns me as much, but there you go. And as far as what mounts they make it for, obviously this is on a Sony body, so they make it for Sony, they make it for Fuji, and they also make it for Nikon Z mount. So any of those systems, just order the correct one for you, and yeah, you have a tremendously great super zoom. So that's that. Obviously, I guess I shouldn't say obviously, because if you're watching this, you want to learn, but what I wanted to say is it's made for full frame, so it'll work on your full frame cameras. If you have a DX body, it will work on it. It's just gonna have that DX crop, obviously, or that APS-C crop, I should say. I use DX because I used to shoot Nikon, so that's why. And as far as focusing distance, this is a nice little extra, I guess. It does have a little bit of a, I'm not gonna call it macro exactly, but it's similar to the 70-180, which I posted a review about that. The focusing distance on the 150-500 at 150 millimeters is 0.6 meters or 23.6 inches. So it's fairly close for the length of the lens, right? So if you're at 2 feet away with a 150 focal length, you're gonna be getting, and I'm gonna show you guys what this photo looks like. So at 150 millimeter, obviously it's gonna be more zoomed than, let's say, if the focusing distance was 2 feet on a 60 millimeter. It's very, very sharp. It's very, very usable. Now, as a wedding photographer, am I gonna be using this as a macro lens? Probably not. The 70-180 would be a better option because it's a much smaller lens, and it's definitely a lens that you can use throughout a wedding day. I took this on a wedding day once, and yeah, it's not something you can really use for a wedding. We're not trying to shoot people from the other side of the venue. So the thing with this lens is it's for someone that loves shooting nature, loves shooting those compressed landscapes. So if you live or are near the mountains and you always, you like to have that compressed look, it looks really cool for that. The photo that I'm showing you guys right now was in Hawaii, and it was of these windmills, and they were probably like 5 miles away. But when I took the photo, obviously you wouldn't be able to tell that unless you really understand photography and you understand compression. So for travel photography, it's nice if you're going to a place with like really epic scenery, but also that has things very far away, obviously. So it is a very niche lens, in my opinion. It's great also if you shoot sports. That's gonna be, I mean, the reach on that is great. And most sports events, it's either gonna be during the day or they have arena lights, which are gonna be pretty bright. So again, you can push your ISO and you could be shooting at 5.6 or 6.7, and you should still be able to get some pretty sharp images out of it. I don't have kids, so I didn't shoot any sports. I also didn't go to the zoo like most photographers. I feel like that have reviewed this lens, that's exactly where they go. I shot it in different situations like the Preserve, which is kind of like a zoo, I guess. With the Preserve, I took it to Hawaii and I was shooting around with some candids and stuff like that. I was shooting some birds there, and I mean, it's just, I was very impressed with how sharp it is. It's definitely not something that you want to be carrying around all day, but it is a great lens if you want something that's a super zoom that, for what it is fairly affordable. And on that note, the price for this lens, for Sony, it's $13.99 US. For Fuji, it's $14.99, and then for Nikon, it's $11.99. So also guys, keep in mind that these lenses do go on sale from time to time. So if you're not in a rush to get it, you can always wait and see when those sales happen. If you follow the Tamron Instagram page, they post about that as soon as they go on sale. Sometimes you'll save $100, $200 on it. So if you're not in a rush, but you think that this could be a really fun lens for you, just keep an eye on it. Put a little, reminder to check on it from time to time, and you could get it for a little bit less. Overall, it's just, like I've been saying, it's just a really great zoom lens. It's a great travel lens. It's not something that you're gonna use all the time, but once you buy it, I mean, any trip that you go on, if you go on a safari, if you go on anything like that, you're always gonna have something that's gonna give you a completely different perspective than any other lens that you have. And that's one thing that I really enjoyed, is being able to get that compression and get a different perspective than I do from my other lenses. The other lenses are definitely more usable for what we do, but this was just a really fun lens to play with. So if you're looking for a super zoom lens that's sharp, that's fairly affordable, that's not crazy heavy, and has all these features that I mentioned, I mean, it's a great buy. So let me know what you guys think. Have you played with it? Have you thought about playing with something like this? I know it's a very specific lens, like I said, but any comments, questions, guys, keep it respectful. Let me know what you think, and thank you guys so much for watching.